The 28th edition of Motul Petit Le Mans did not disappoint. The championships went down to the wire, we witnessed some of the best racing of the season, and different strategy calls late in the race helped decide our winners. This is your Petit Le Mans post-race report. First off, what a race and what a weekend overall at Petit Le Mans. It was a very fitting way to end the season. We had, of course, some great storylines to watch coming into this race, ranging from various championship battles to teams and manufacturers leaving the sport or putting their programs on pause. So there was a lot to follow along in this race, and unfortunately not all of those storylines that we had coming into the race really got to fully play out in this one, but there was still a ton of exceptional racing. In addition to the great racing, it was also fairly uninterrupted as well. You might recall back to the preview video that I did. I talked that we've seen an average of 9 full course yellows here at Petit Le Mans over the past 3 seasons. But this year's race and last year's race seem to be forming a new trend here, which is a very positive one. Sure, we did see 5 full course yellows in the first 3 hours of this race, but for the remaining 7 hours of the race, we only had 1. And what this allowed to kind of play out was some great strategy towards the end. And we really got to see those truly strong cars rise to the top. And while in some of these races where you do have those really long extended green flag runs, you can sometimes see the field get really spread out. Going into the final hour of this race, into the final pit stop cycle of the race, 3 of the 4 classes were separated by the first and second positions were separated by less than, I think, 4 seconds in 3 of the 4 classes. So it was great racing all around. It was a fantastic race to sit here and watch. And we also had plenty of drama at the end, especially in GTP. We had some fuel strategy, just general strategy that we got to see play out in this one, along with the great battles, along with a really close finish. It was just a great race. And as usual, I'll start off with GTP. And the winner in this race was truly deserving. They dominated this one, and that was Cadillac. It was a second win in a row for the number 31 Action Express Racing entry as Jack Aitken, Earl Bamber, and Fred Vesti combined to lead 217 of the 436 laps in this race, including the final 189 laps. I don't really know what to say about this entry right now. It's 2 races in a row that they've won, 2 races in a row that they've dominated, even though today, I'm going to say they only led half of this race. They very easily could have led more than that. In the first stint of the race, they were behind the 60. They were just kind of buying their time. This lineup and this team is going to be very, very scary next year if this lineup stays together. Something has clicked these past couple of races, and that 31, looking ahead to next year, the momentum that they've built up at the end of this year, they're going to be scary next year. And despite the 31 and how dominant they were seemingly throughout the entire race, whether it was sunny conditions in the middle of the afternoon, or they seemed to just get stronger when the sun went down, the same couldn't be said for Wayne Taylor Racing and their 2 cars. Now, I don't know if just the 31 found something that WTR wasn't able to find here, but there's definitely been some performance differences with those cars, and the 31, like I said, they've really emerged strong here at the end of the season to set themselves up for the off season. And with the 31 winning, it wasn't a great day for Wayne Taylor Racing, as those 2 Cadillacs will come home in 6th and 8th. The story of the race, though, and probably the story of the weekend, one of the stories of the season, I think, when we look back at all of this, is going to be the run that the Aston Martin Valkyrie had today. It was an incredible performance, and I don't really think that is giving them the full credit that they deserve. Ross Gunn, Roman DeAngelis, and Alex Riberas drove that Valkyrie, the number 23 Valkyrie, to its first IMSA podium, a 2nd place finish, the best finish for the car, and honestly, they could have won this race. You look back at the final hour of the race and the strategy call that they made. Great strategy call, in my opinion. I know that they came up just short, but I think they had to try something to try and leapfrog ahead of the 6 and the 31 who were ahead of them on track and to win this race. It just didn't quite work out for them. They weren't able to quite put in the fast laps that they needed to gain the time on the 31 before they made their pit stop, and they come up just a couple of seconds shy of the win. It's a little bit of going to be, what could have been if they pull off a few faster laps there in the middle stint of that final stint, but really, this is, in my opinion, just the cherry on top of an incredible season for the 23. I don't know if you could have really asked for a better first year out of a car here in IMSA. They completed a ton of laps. They got better as the season went on. And when it ends with a performance like this, we're going to be watching the 23 and the Valkyrie in general next year in IMSA as, we're probably going to see them win a race next year. All the performance, everything's pointing towards that. So a great weekend for them, and a good weekend for Porsche, who did what they needed to do to lock up the GTP championship, and what I would call kind of just a gutsy performance from them. Now, the 963 was not the fastest car on the track, really, I would say at any point this weekend, but they were consistent. They were always in the running, and they were in the running late in this race. They didn't have the same pace that the Cadillac did, and honestly, the Valkyrie may have arguably had better pace than them as well, but still, the number 6 entry was able to pull off a podium finish and lock up that GTP title. The 70 didn't finish quite as strong as they brought it home in 10th place. If you want to talk about good performances, maybe even a gutsy performance, we got to talk about Lamborghini and the SC63 today. It was their final race before that program goes on pause, and give them full credit. That team, they gave it their all. This turned out to be their best ever finish in IMSA, bringing it home in 4th place and their first top 5. Going back to Indy, and you kind of think about how there were some late race full course yellows that came out that really didn't go their way, wasn't what they wanted to see. Here in this race, it was kind of the opposite. They were kind of looking for that late race full course yellow to save themselves having to make that final pit stop. It never came. Had it come, they could have been on for a podium finish here in their final race. It just didn't quite work out that way, but still a great race from the SC63, and it kind of makes you wonder, like, if we had seen this performance, earlier in the year and the pace that they've shown the last couple of rounds, could we be having a different conversation about that Lamborghini program? Maybe not from the manufacturer, factory supported perspective, but could we have maybe seen a privateer entry show interest and want to step up and continue running this car? It's going to be one of those, what could have been sort of scenarios. But regardless, what a way to go out and send that program into its paused phase, I guess. Then we have Acura, and what a weird weekend for Acura. I feel like, they showed good pace all weekend. The 93 unfortunately had gremlins that they were battling through practice and throughout this race as well, but they hung in there. And in the end, they didn't really have great pace when the sun went down. I mentioned that the 60 led some laps early, but they just didn't have the pace that Cadillac did when the sun went down, and they kind of faded later in the race. They faded in the race. They ultimately would also not win the Manufacturers' Championship. Porsche beat them on track, locked that up, but a 5th and a 7th place finish for Acura to round out there. I guess considering the team change and everything as well, this is still a solid, first season back from Meyershank Racing, but a 5th and a 7th place result in this one. They would definitely be wanting a little bit more than that. And then we have BMW. I talked about it a little bit with Acura, but with BMW, when the sun went down, their pace really kind of faded as well. They faded hard towards the end of this race, especially in those long stints towards the end. Just an unfortunate way for, RLL, who's of course not going to be operating that program next year. It's going to be WRT. It's an unfortunate way for it to all go out, especially after some of the positive momentum that they had built up earlier in this season, and then kind of faded, throughout the late summer and into the end of season stretch. Both of these cars in this race finished a lap down in 9th and 11th place respectively. LMP2 overall had a bit of a forgettable race. We saw the regular kind of shenanigans that we've seen unfold unfold in these races recently, but we also unfortunately didn't really see any of our strong storylines develop here at all. The championship hunt was looking interesting early on. The 22 who needed to have a really good race. It was like an 85-point gap coming into the finale here. They needed to have a really strong race, and they were having that early. They were leading the race, and AO Racing just didn't look as strong. Didn't look like this was going to be a particularly strong race for them. They were running kind of mid-pack. Looked like we were going to be in for a great championship finish, but then unfortunately the 22, they had a mechanical issue. They dropped a number of laps down, and championship championship discussion basically over at that point. We of course did have some other storylines, Gar Robinson, his final race in IMSA as well before he goes into more off-road racing, and they struggled. They had some contact earlier in the race. I don't know if that affected the handling of the car, but just not a strong final race for them, which is unfortunate. That's a team, that's a car that's been so strong ever since they entered the WeatherTech Championship, whether it be in GTD or LMP3 or now LMP2. It kind of sucked to see them finish off their season like that. But for the second year in a row and the second race in a row, it would be the number 11 TDS Racing entry of Stephen Thomas, Mikkel Jensen, and Hunter McElrea taking the win out of the 43 Inter-Europol competition, and the 18 Aero Motorsports entry picked up a podium in third. GTD Pro was great, and just kind of singing the same praises that we've sang for it all season long. The racing was fantastic, not just in this race, but throughout the whole season. Probably the best class that we saw from start to finish this season in IMSA, and this race was no exception. We saw some great, respectful racing. That is something that we haven't always seen this year in this class, but we saw a really good battle between Paul Miller Racing and one of the Corvettes. I believe it was the 4 towards the end of the race, the final hour. They're battling for the lead through the very tight and winding S's section, but we saw some really respectful racing out of them. It was close, it was hard, but it was clean, and you love to see it. Unfortunately, though, the one thing that, again, it stunk that we didn't get to see one of these storylines develop, and that was for the GTD Pro title. The 81 Dragon Speed and the 3 Corvette were in a basically winner takes the championship situation. The 3 Corvette, got to give them credit. They were steady as she goes the entire race. Whereas the 81 stumbled a bit. The 81, they got spun, which was unfortunate, but they also picked up a couple penalties that were really, really killed them. Ultimately, it was the last penalty that they got that truly killed them. It was during these long green flag stints, and of course, you're not going to be able to make up a drive-through penalty without the help of a full course yellow, and they weren't able to. The Ferraris were very quick all weekend long, but just mistakes are what cost Dragon Speed in a season where they haven't made many mistakes, and the storybook ending ultimately comes up just short. At the end, though, it was the 48 Paul Miller Racing BMW of Max Hesse, Dan Harper, and Connor D. Filippi that takes the win. The number 4 Corvette Racing by Pratt Miller Motorsports entry finished in second, and the number 3 Corvette finished in third. Now, I talked about Ferrari being strong this weekend, and that was on full display in GTD. Here, it was a dominating performance by the number 21 AF Corsa Ferrari, who rebounded from an early race penalty, and they led 262 of 405 laps en route to the win. Simon Mann, Lila Wadu de Cellier, and Alessandro Piriguidi drove that car to the win, and it was a great battle in GTD. For the final 3 hours of that race, it was basically the 21 Ferrari holding off the 021 Ferrari as they were separated by, it seemed like the entire final 3 hours, it was like 5 seconds or less was the gap, pretty much nose to tail. It was a lot of fun to watch. We never got to see any super hard racing necessarily from there, but it was an intriguing battle to watch nonetheless, and a solid race in GTD. Sorry, it wasn't the 021 Ferrari, it was the 023 Ferrari that they were battling. The 023 did come home in second, with the 12 Vassar Sullivan Lexus rounding out the podium. Now, if you're like me, you've probably found yourself at the racetrack looking at the photos that you've taken, wondering why yours don't quite look like the pros. If this is you, you should check out Paddock Focus Photography Workshops. You're already familiar with the incredible work that Paddock Focus co-host Jamie Price puts out. You see his work here all the time on this channel. But now you can learn from him and fellow photographer Drew Gibson from the comfort of your home. Everything from how to become a motorsport photographer, race-specific photography guides, and more. You can get it all at paddockfocus.teachable.com, and when you use the promo code S's, yes, that's promo code S's, you can get 10% off. Again, you can check that out at paddockfocus.teachable.com, and a big thank you to them and Jamie Price for supporting the channel throughout the season. There were also some support series races here this weekend. In the Michelin Pilot Challenge, it was the second race in a row for both of these class winners. It was Moise Uretsky and Michael Kupra in the Ibiza Farm Motorsports McLaren taking the GS class win, while in TCR it was Tyler Gonzalez and Eric Powell in the Victor Gonzalez Racing Team Cupra taking their second win in a row there. In the championship, the RS1 Porsche of Jan Halen and Luca Mars held on for the GS championship win. And in TCR, you'll remember that very close points battle that we had. It was the 98 Brian Herta Autosport Hyundai of Harry Gottsacker and Mason Filippi who held on for a 20-point win. They barely held on after a strong run from the sister number 76 Hyundai in that final race and made things very interesting. Should be noted here that Mason unfortunately missed a round of the championship, so Harry is technically the sole driver's champion in TCR. In the VP Sports Car Challenge, in LMP3 in Race 1, it was Oscar Tunjo, while in Race 2, it was Valentino Catalano taking the win there. In GTDX, it was a sweep for Jake Walker across both races, and in GSX, it was a sweep also for Kiko Porto. Valentino Catalano won the LMP3 championship with Brian Thienes, the bronze champion in LMP3. Adam Adelson won the GTDX championship, while Samantha Tan won the bronze championship for that class. While Kiko Porto won the GSX championship and Ian Porter won the bronze championship. Porsche Carrera Cup North America was also on track for 2 races. It was Tyler Maxson and Riley Dickinson taking the wins there. In the Pro-Am class, it was Alan Metney sweeping both races, while in the Masters class, Scott Blind swept those races. The championships will be decided during the COTA Formula 1 weekend, with just 2 points separating Riley Dickinson and Ryan Yardley for that Pro Championship. And finally, in the Whelen Mazda MX-5 Cup, it was Jeremy Fletcher winning race 1, with Sally Mott being the top finishing female, while in race 2 it was Parker DeYoung that won, with the top finishing female being Sally Mott. Jeremy Fletcher took the championship here after winning 3 of the last 4 races en route to that championship win. Let's take a look at the final championship standings now, presented by P1 Web Development. If you're a race team, driver, chassis builder, or engine shop who takes racing seriously, but your online presence is an afterthought, then you're leaving money on the table. P1 builds sites that get you noticed, get you sponsors, and get your business taken seriously. You can check out the new P1 website at p1webdevelopment.com. In GTP, it's the number 6 Porsche Penske Motorsports 963 that takes the championship win here with 2,907 points. They beat out the 31 Whelen Racing Cadillac, who made a heck of a run at the end of the season to grab second place in the championship. The 7 Porsche finishes in 3rd, the 24 BMW in 4th, and rounding out the top 5, the number 93 Meyershank Racing Acura. In LMP2, it's the number 99 AO Racing entry who held on with 2,254 points. That was a 100-point win over the number 11 TDS Racing entry, who again had a very strong charge at the end of the year to grab second in the championship. The 43 Inter Europol, the 22 United Autosport, and the 74 Riley round out your top 5. In GTD Pro was the number 3 Corvette Racing by Pratt Miller Motorsports Corvette, taking the win here by 73 points over the number 81 Dragon Speed Ferrari. The 64 Ford, the number 48 Paul Miller Racing BMW, and the 77 AO Racing entry round out your top 5. And in GTD, it was the 57 Windward Racing Mercedes beating out the 27 Heart of Racing Aston Martin, with the 12 Vassar Sullivan Lexus, 96 Turner Motorsport BMW, and 120 Wright Motorsports Porsche rounding out your top 5 there. At the time of recording, the Michelin Endurance Cup points weren't finalized, but at the end of the race, it was the 7 Porsche who edged out the 31 Cadillac in GTP. In LMP2, it was the 11 TDS Racing and the number 43 Inter Europol who were tied there, but the 11 did take the win on tiebreaker. GTD Pro had the number 48 Paul Miller Racing BMW take the win there, and in GTD it was the number 21 AF Corsa Ferrari that captured that win. And in the Bronze Cup, again, this was one of those stories that we didn't get to see unfold. An unfortunate lap 1, basically like first couple of corners wreck, took out the Inception Racing Ferrari, and it virtually handed that championship win to the 13 AWA Corvette. So they've won now for their second year in a row and will be heading back to Le Mans next summer. There we go. The 2025 IMSA season is all wrapped up. There was a ton of good racing this year. A thank you to all of you who tuned in throughout the entire season. There's going to be a ton more videos to come in the off season that I'm excited to get to work on now, so keep a lookout for those. But in the meantime, we had some pretty exciting state of the sport announcements that came out this weekend. You can check out all the news on that right here. And a huge shout out to all the channel supporters. If you too want to support the show, you can head to patreon.com/offintheesses or click that join button below. Once again though, thanks for tuning in. I hope everyone has a great race weekend and doesn't go off in the S's.